Well, by now everybody's seen the devastating injury that Nick Chubb had to go through. Second time in his career to have an injury like that. Here's what Kirby had to say on Tuesday night about Nick Chubb's Monday night injury. He says he's an incredible human being, first and foremost. What kid still goes back to their high school weight room, strength coach, program, track, and works out the way he does? He's very rare in the sports world to find. It is very rare in the sports world to find someone as humble and just as great a person like he is. I reached out to him. I know he's probably flooded with all kinds of messages and people reaching out to him, so no expectation of anything in return. Just a lot of respect for him and what he did for this program in terms of toughness, buy-in, and give back. He decided to come back when he did. I thought it was in the best interest. Uh, I thought it was in his best interest to come back, but certainly he did. He certainly did Georgia a favor returning too, and he had an outstanding year when he did. I talked to Ron Corson, who is Georgia's sports medicine czar, about it today, and he thinks he and Ron thinks that Nick will make a full recovery and bounce back. That's just who he is, so he'll be ready to get back after it. I was, watching the game when Nick suffered that injury. I don't think that there was anything nefarious about it on Mika Fitzpatrick's part. I'll tell you, I want to talk about a couple things here at once. Number one, what Nick meant for Georgia. Because I covered Georgia before Kirby. I obviously covered Georgia since before Kirby was there, and Nick Chubb was really important to Georgia. He is one of the few things that one of the few men who tied that time together between Mark and Kirby. He was a very good player. I was on the sideline when he ran right at me, and I knew immediately that he had gotten hurt in a very tremendous way. I've never seen a knee bend like that before in person. And so to watch again that he get hurt like that is beyond disappointing. Um, and it was right at the beginning of the game. That was the part that was so difficult. And I'm actually not going to show the images, not just of him getting hurt, but the reaction of it. I think some other time might be the right time, if that's even a thing. But standing 3 feet from him as he's rolling around in pain was not a lot of fun. And obviously he was going through much more pain and suffering than I've dealt with physically. But to see that happen again, just hard to deal with. I'm looking at the images right now of Nick at that Tennessee game, and he's got his hood on over his head. So that was a really difficult time for Nick, and for him to have to go through it again, really hard, really just difficult to deal with. I mean, I think what the thing about Nick Chubb, and maybe I'll roll some other images over the top of this thing as we go. The thing about Nick Chubb is, in 14, he was the guy that was, I don't know, their third or fourth guy coming out of this thing. But he became such a spectacular running back for Georgia. And I remember the Arkansas game in 14. So that Thursday or Wednesday, I can't remember if it was Thursday or Wednesday. We found out that Todd was suspended on Thursday, I think it was. And I was like, what? And so we were on the way to Missouri, basically. I mean, I remember doing a lot of the reporting in Tennessee, in the middle of Tennessee, halfway to Missouri. And I was just thinking to myself, this season is wrecked. I have no idea how they're going to win this game. But they won the game because of Nick Chubb. I mean, he just, and I'm not rolling over these in any particular order. I mean, here's Nick and Sony after the Liberty Bowl in Kirby's first season, and they decided they'd come back. Here he is earlier that year against North Carolina, blistering them for a touchdown. Um, Nick was at Georgia as consequential a player as any player that's played for Kirby Smart, including Stetson Bennett. Nick was as consequential to what Kirby's built as any player, including Stetson Bennett. And the reason why is because he set the tone. He set the tone of that thing. Here he is in the national championship game against Alabama in 17. Here he is at the Rose Bowl. I mean, I don't know how many. Here he is, again at the Rose Bowl. I don't know how many images I have of Nick. It's a lot. 1,300 that we've kept. 1,337 that we've kept. But just a spectacular, football player, but a completely decent human being. And that's another thing that about Nick. I met him his junior year at Cedartown High School. His mother was there. We were doing a photo shoot. He's just quiet. He'll work. This is a great shot of him and Isaiah Wynn and Sony with DeAndre Swift right there in the foreground. You can't see other. That's at the Dome when they beat Auburn to go on to play in the college football playoff. I mean, Nick was just. It sounds like I'm talking like he's passed away. He's not. I mean, this is Nick Chubb's going to play football again. If I'm betting, Nick Chubb's playing football again. Okay, that would be my get. Make sure you're taking advantage of everything EcoPoly has to offer. That link is down below. 15% off anything on their store and free shipping. It's a great opportunity. EcoPoly designs, crafts, and ships from Eastman, Georgia, which is Dodge County. That manufacturing center down there, a Georgia-made certified company. The state of Georgia has looked at the processes and products at EcoPoly and certified that EcoPoly manufactures in Georgia, employs Georgians, obviously. Huge showroom down there. Just a really awesome blend of luxury, sustainable furniture, and relaxation. You're going to make memories in these chairs watching guys like Nick Chubb. Let me get back to these photos because they, as a person who takes these images, and some of them are not. Some of these are soft, what we call soft. They're not ideal images. Here he is a year later in Athens, but he was very much liked on the team in the program. Nick was something else. This night right here, man, the guy had, I think, 200 and something yards against Louisville, and he just ran all over Louisville. Not that image is not sharp, but he took this exact carry right here. He took this carry about, I think it was 90 yards in the way for Georgia to win the Belk Bowl. But he was just, I'm not trying to get to these Tennessee images. This one just popped up. I can't know what's next, so I'm going to kind of be careful here. Yeah, I'm going to get out of this. But, the other thing is about Nick is that he was just so, not just physically tough, but mentally tough too. The comeback from the knee injury. This is an image of him about 30 days before Georgia took on North Carolina at the Dome, and right there on his left knee, you can see the remnants of that really rough injury that he suffered. That was about 10 months before that, and Kirby has used that as sort of a litmus test of how guys recover from injuries. But Nick's not normal. Nick's not normal. Here's Nick and Sony. Sony's banged up in this one. This is just before the 16 season. This was actually right here, and probably the most important game that led Nick and Sony to come back and in 2016, which was the 2017, excuse me, which was the Georgia Tech game. They both had catastrophic plays close to the end zone. They were very much in control of that game, Georgia, and they both Sonny and Nick had just very difficult turnovers that cost Georgia points, and was just rough. Here's Gant with Nick Chubb. He's an amazing player, and his drive is something else. It is something else. He was a spectacular running back at Georgia. You can see we care about photographs. That's the other thing here with all this. I mean, you can see we care about photographs of dog posts. It's something that really does matter to us. This is Brandon Cublano in the background here. This was actually a very good image that I got at the end of that North Carolina game. In many ways, I think, part of what happens when you're playing running back in the NFL is just so rough. I mean, it's a, I wonder, here is with Peter Burns, who is the SEC network. I do wonder to some degree if half the time, if you're playing running back in the league, if you're just waiting to get injured. I mean, that's what it feels like. These guys are the physical toll you take on your body takes being a person who is put on the ground, physically put on the ground. That's a lot. That is a lot of work. And the running backs do that. And I think he's missed 7 games in 6 years in the NFL. Some crazy number like that. But here he is about, 2 years after the injury at Neyland, narrowly losing the national championship. Him and Sony and Nick and Sony, Nick, Kirby, Jake Fromm, all those seniors, Davin Bellamy, etc. That game was one of the all-time, great college football games. Here's Nick and Sony and Kirby leaving the field after a devastating loss to Alabama. Excuse me. After a devastating loss to Alabama, and you see the confetti on them. Photographers in our way here. That happens, but that was a tough moment for them. And I remember, I think I might have been the only reporter that covers Georgia in there. There just were not a lot of people in that post-game press conference with Kirby and Nick, and I think it was Kirby, Nick, and Sony, but I'm not sure if it was Kirby, Nick, and Sony. But that game was tough, man. And Sony had a better game that night than Nick. But it's just not. There's not a lot of guys in the history of Georgia football that are the same, that are thought of the same way as Nick Chubb, that have had the resiliency of Nick Chubb. This image here are Georgia's 4 captains walking underneath the Rose Bowl to the stadium as captains are being riled up. So that's Sony, Nick, Isaiah, and then Roquan Smith, who you may know who that is too. And of course, this image here of Kirby and Nick after that night. Nick Chubb, you don't hear bad things about him. You don't, no one says, oh, that guy sucks. No one's ever said that. Like, I know plenty of people. I mean, you meet people that know the players, you meet the players, you meet their family, you meet the coaches, you get a feel of people. It's not my job to necessarily say who is a villain and who is not. But Nick Chubb, you're not going to get a lot of people saying bad stuff about him. His resiliency as a football player, and it's just as a human being, is pretty significant. This is Wes Muhlenberg shot this. This was I don't know if this is the moment where Nick basically turned the thing around for Georgia. As it turns out, I think it is. I'll talk about this play and then I'll stop talking. This is Nick Chubb at midfield at the Rose Bowl, uh, and he would not be denied. This is him scoring a touchdown after breaking. Let's see. I see 5 Sooners in the shot within 5 yards of him, and he runs through all of them. He was an exceptional player at Georgia, and he was one of the reasons why Kirby Smart has a dominant program is because of Nick Chubb. Here he is scoring the game tying touchdown to send Georgia into overtime against Oklahoma. Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm not showing the images. I'm sorry, y'all. I'll just go backwards just for a second. Here he is scoring the game tying touchdown for Georgia against Oklahoma, and I do want to go back to this one image from him breaking the tackles against Oklahoma. This is Dylan's image. I mean, Nick was so excited to make that play, but it was an unbelievable play. He breaks, I don't know how many tackles. It is as consequential a run. I don't know. And some of these are blurry, but look at him leave them in the dust. It might have been as consequential a run as there's been in Kirby's time. I'd want to go back and take a look at that a little bit closer in my notes. I don't remember everything. I remember a lot. I don't remember everything. But that run in the Rose Bowl was indicative of what you get with Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is a winner. He's proven that over time. You think about in 2014 having to carry the load literally for Georgia when Todd got hurt, when Keith got hurt. It was him and Brendan Douglas. In 2015, a catastrophic injury, okay? And comes back for the 2016 game where he dominates North Carolina. And then at the end of 2016, comes back. And from that moment forward, Georgia's not the same program as it had been. From the moment in December where those guys came back, from that moment, Kirby was perfectly fine in his first year. He was probably going to succeed in a big way. But that moment changed everything. And there were things that led to that, okay? His recovery, his getting back. But the Georgia Tech game mattered a lot. But those guys, it mattered a lot to Nick to come back and do it the right way. I wouldn't want to go out as a Georgia player losing 2 of 3 of my entire career. Georgia dominates Georgia Tech, and you're the only guy that's lost 2 of 3. No wonder. That's one reason they came back, and they made that clear, both those guys. But Nick is a winner. He has proven that over time. I am not surprised at all with the success he's had in the NFL. I don't have anything left to say about Nick because it's all good.